I was 79 years old the morning I realized my own grandson, Tyler, had drained $42,800 out of the savings account I'd built over a lifetime of busted knuckles and cold dawns on construction sites across central Ohio. Funny thing is, you'd think a moment like that would come with some dramatic thunderclap, some bolt from the heavens telling you your blood has betrayed you. But no, it was just a Tuesday, a gray, damp one at that. The kind where your knees hurt before your eyes even open. I remember the smell of the Folgers brewing in my old Mr. Coffee machine, the hiss of it sputtering like it always did. I remember the way the bank manager cleared his throat over the phone, soft, polite, like he was about to tell me my dog died. I remember my hand shaking so badly I had to steady it against the chipped laminate counter. You're probably thinking, "Grandpa, how did you not see it sooner?" Well, hell, so was I. The man on the phone said it slow, like he wasn't sure I'd understand. "Mr. Caldwell, the withdrawals were authorized digitally, through your online access, over the last 7 months. 7 months. Every penny I'd put aside for the winter that was coming, my winter, the real one. The coffee had turned bitter in my mouth. I could barely swallow it. I asked him how much is left. He hesitated. I heard papers shift, a keyboard clack. $17.83. And that's when the room went quiet. Not the peaceful quiet, no. The hollow kind. The kind you get when someone has ripped something out of you so suddenly your body hasn't caught up yet. I didn't shout, didn't swear, didn't throw the mug against the wall like maybe I should have. I just stared at the dent in my kitchen table, the one Tyler made when he was 12, hammering bottle caps he'd found at the 4th of July picnic. He'd laughed. I told him to stop. He didn't. That dent was still there, mocking me that morning. I whispered, "It was him, wasn't it?" The bank manager didn't answer. He didn't have to. I hung up the phone, and the silence pressed around me like thick Ohio humidity. You ever feel your heart break and harden at the same time? Like a crack in old concrete that suddenly turns into a wall. That's what happened right then. I should have called Tyler, should have asked him, should have given him a chance to explain. But I didn't. I didn't because deep down, even before that phone call, I already knew. The last time he'd visited, he called me old man instead of grandpa. Not joking, not light, flat, like he'd already written me off. He was 23 and thought the world owed him something, thought I owed him something. "My student loans are drowning me, Grandpa," he'd said, pacing my living room like a slick salesman. "Just spot me a little, just until I get on my feet." I told him, "Tyler, I've got my own feet to worry about. Medicare doesn't cover everything." He rolled his eyes, rolled them at me. That was 2 months before the phone call. I sat there in my kitchen, rubbing my thumb over that old dent in the table, thinking about all the times Tyler sat across from me, eating scrambled eggs I made him, stealing sips of my coffee when he thought I wasn't looking, asking me to tell him stories about the job sites. Stories about the union, about the guys I'd worked with. He used to look at me like I mattered, like I was some kind of hero. Now, he looked at me like an ATM that couldn't fight back. But I'm gonna tell you something right now, and you listen close. I wasn't weak. I wasn't senile. And I damn sure wasn't done. The moment I realized it was him, the moment it sunk in that my own grandson had taken nearly $43,000 from me, that was the moment something inside me shifted. A man can only be pushed so far before he pushes back. And I pushed back harder than Tyler ever expected. Because that day, while the coffee cooled and the gray sky pressed against my windows, I made myself a promise. I'd get every dollar of justice. And by the time I was done, Tyler wouldn't just lose money. He'd lose something far more precious. His freedom. Before everything went to hell, before lawyers and detectives in courtrooms with that stale government smell, my life was, well, quiet. Maybe too quiet now that I look back at it with clearer eyes. You see, after Maggie died, coming up on 9 years ago now, I settled into a kind of rhythm. Not a happy rhythm, not a sad one either. More like coasting. Like an old truck that still runs fine but doesn't go much farther than the grocery store and the VFW hall. I lived just outside Newark, Ohio, in the same little ranch house Maggie and I bought back in '87. Beige siding, blue shutters. She insisted on painting herself. My knees weren't much good anymore, so I didn't mow the yard like I used to. Tommy Caldwell next door did it for me most weeks. No charge, he'd always say, waving away the 20 I tried to hand him. Folks around here understand what aging looks like. They respect it. Every morning I'd wake up around 6:15 without an alarm. Old habits from construction work die slow. The coffee went on first, Folger's Classic Roast, the only brand Maggie ever bought, and then I'd sit at the kitchen table, the same one with that dent Tyler made years back, and I'd just listen. Birds, wind through the maple tree, the hum of the fridge. A man gets used to silence if he lives with it long enough. You might not believe it, but I used to brag on Tyler more than anyone. He was the only grandson I had after all. My daughter, Corinne, married young and had him at 21. I remember holding him in Riverside Hospital, tiny thing, red-faced and loud as a fire alarm. Maggie whispered, "He's got your lungs," and I didn't know whether that was a compliment or a warning. Growing up, Tyler was always around. Saturdays at my place, football games in the fall, fishing at Buckeye Lake in the summers. He used to ask me 1,000 questions. "Grandpa, did you really climb that radio tower in '76? "Yep." "Weren't you scared?" "Only of your grandma finding out." He'd laugh until he hiccuped. He admired me then, or maybe he just admired the version of me that still swung hammers and drove a Chevy with the windows down. But things changed around the time he hit 18. I started noticing little shifts in him, tiny at first, harmless looking like fine cracks in a driveway. Senior year, he asked me for $200 to fix his laptop for college. I handed it over, proud he was going, only to find out later he'd blown it on some weekend party up in Columbus. Corinne called me, furious, not at him, mind you, but at whoever tattled. "That's just boys being boys, Dad," she'd said. "Boys being boys don't lie," I told her. That didn't go over too well. Still, I convinced myself it was a phase. God knows I wasn't perfect at that age. Maggie could have written a book about my stupid years. But Tyler's stupid years stretched on. He dropped out of Columbus State after one semester. "The professors don't know how to teach," he said. Then he worked at a warehouse for 3 weeks before deciding he was too smart to stack boxes for a living. After that came a string of jobs he quit faster than I could write them down. A deli counter, a landscaping crew, a car wash, some online crypto thing he swore was the future. Through it all, I kept giving him small amounts, 20s, 30s, the occasional 100 if he caught me in a soft mood. Not because I wanted to, but because I remembered the boy who used to watch Buckeyes games at my side, the boy who hugged me so tight I'd have to pretend it didn't hurt my ribs. But something deeper shifted after Maggie's funeral. I saw it that day. He didn't cry, not one tear. He stood there stiff, eyes cold, like he was watching a movie he'd already seen. At the cemetery, while folks were lowering her into the ground, he leaned close and whispered, "You're not gonna move in with Mom, right? 'Cause her house is already really full." I remember my breath catching, my grief cracking into confusion. I pulled back and looked at him. "Boy, that's not what today's about." He shrugged, just saying. That should have been the first real warning. It wasn't just immaturity anymore, it was something else. A hardness in him. A selfishness that felt too practiced for a young man. But loneliness can make you blind. You tell yourself lies to keep from seeing the truth. "He's just stressed," I'd say. "College didn't work out. He'll grow out of it." I told myself that same story over and over until I started believing it. Then came the day Tyler set up online banking for me. "Grandpa, nobody uses paper statements anymore," he said, sitting at my kitchen table with his hoodie half-zipped and his knee bouncing like he had electricity in him. "You gotta get with the times." "I like paper," I told him. He rolled his eyes. "Yeah, but this is safer. Automatic updates, two-factor authentication, all that." At the time, I didn't know what two-factor meant. Now I know it meant Tyler controlling everything from that damn phone of his. He typed fast, clicking through screens I didn't understand. "What's that password?" I asked. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll write everything down for you." He never did. But I didn't push. He was helping, right? Helping like a good grandson would. You ever look back on a moment and want to reach into your own memory, grab yourself by the collar and shake the sense into you? That was one of those moments. Right there. At that damn table, watching him type away, my future draining out through every keystroke. Back then, though, it all felt harmless, routine, like family helping family. But time has a way of revealing the truth you tried too hard to ignore. And the truth was coming for me faster than I knew. I didn't spot the scam all at once. That's the part that still burns me late at night when the house settles and my mind won't quiet down. It didn't happen like some dramatic movie moment where the old man suddenly realizes the villain's been living in his basement. No, it crept in slow, like water under a door during a storm. You notice the damp patch on the rug only after it's already ruined the floorboards underneath. The first crack came one afternoon in early March, March 12th, 2022. I remember the date because the wind was whipping so hard it rattled the gutters loose, and I'd just come back inside after wrestling them back into place like some stubborn old fool trying to prove I still had it. I'd sat down in my recliner, the one Maggie bought me when my lower back went bad, and I saw an email notification pop up on my old laptop. I only used that thing for two things: looking at photos Corinne sent and tracking my Social Security deposits. Everything else confused me or felt like a scam. But the message looked official, clean logo, Columbia Federal Bank account alert. I squinted at the screen, dragging my finger across the trackpad like it was a scratch-off ticket. The email said, "Your recent transaction of $1,200 has been processed." I remember whispering out loud, "1,200 for what?" My heart thumped a little harder. I clicked around until I somehow reached my account summary. Don't ask me how. It felt like blind luck, and there it was. Zelle transfer. I didn't know what Zelle was then. Sounded like a skin cream or something you'd buy at Walgreens. Just to be sure, I muttered, "Computer, what the hell is Zelle?" Like maybe the thing would talk back. It didn't. It just stared at me with that smug blue glow. I sat there for a minute, chewing the inside of my cheek, habit I have when something's wrong. Maggie used to tap my hand and say, "Stop doing that, you'll draw blood." But she wasn't there to stop me anymore. Finally, I picked up the phone and called Tyler. He answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Grandpa, what's up?" His voice was bright, too bright, like someone turning on the lights in a dark theater. "Tyler," I said, "did you buy something on my account? Something for $1,200. There was a pause, too long. I could hear voices in the background, young voices, male, laughing, something clattering like beer bottles. Then he said, "Oh yeah, that was me. Remember last month you said you wanted me to handle that thing, the repair, for your heater." My heater. I looked across the room at my old gas furnace humming quietly like it always did. "What repair?" "You know," he said, "the part replacement for the thermostat." "My thermostat is fine," I told him. "Works better than my knees anyway." He laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was thin, forced. "Maybe I'm mixing things up. I've been helping Mom with her bills too. I get stuff crossed sometimes. But I'll check, okay? Don't worry about it." I hung up uneasy, the kind of uneasy that sits in your stomach like undercooked meat. Later that night I called Corinne, just to mention it, just to see her reaction. "Tyler said he fixed something for me I don't remember asking about," I said carefully. On the other end, she sighed like a tired schoolteacher. "Dad, he's under a lot of stress. Don't nitpick him. He's helping you. Be grateful." "I am grateful," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. "I just want to understand." "Well," she said, her voice sharp now, "maybe you're forgetting things." That sentence landed like a brick on my chest. I know she didn't mean it cruelly. Corinne never outright tries to be cruel, but it hit me hard. Because that's the one thing every old man fears more than broken bones or empty wallets, losing his mind. I didn't argue, didn't want to sound defensive. That's what people do when they're guilty, right? Except I was. But that small doubt, just a speck of it, burrowed into me and didn't leave. Over the next few weeks, little things kept happening. A $400 withdrawal here, a $250 transfer there. Every time I saw something I didn't recognize and asked Tyler, he had a new explanation. That was for your medication pickup. That was for the car mechanic you said you wanted me to call. That was for your internet renewal. You told me to handle that. Each time he said it smooth, too smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. One evening in early April he came by to check on me, or so he said. He walked into my house without knocking, hoodie up, smelling like something herbal and skunky. Weed, I guess. I pretended not to notice. He flopped onto my couch like he owned the place. You got any cash on you? I need gas. I looked at him hard. Gas for what? My car. You drove here, I said. He blinked. Yeah, but I gotta get home too. I pulled out my wallet and handed him a 20. He snatched it quick. Before he left, I said, Tyler, I want to change my online password. How do I do that? He turned, his expression tightening just a hair, so fast I almost missed it. Why? Something wrong? No, I said, just being careful. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry about the password, Grandpa. I'll handle everything. That's when something inside me twitched. A small flare, not anger, not suspicion, just discomfort, like when a splinter works deeper under the skin. But still, I didn't act. Then came the night everything snapped into place, not fully, but enough to start the avalanche. It was April 28th. Rain was hitting the windows sideways and I couldn't sleep. Insomnia gets worse with age. You lie there staring at the ceiling fan, counting regrets. Around midnight, I walked into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. I glanced at the mail pile on the counter and saw an envelope marked "Important information enclosed." That phrase always gets old people's attention. Inside was a letter from Columbia Federal saying my account balance was critically low. The words blurred for a second and I had to sit down. My stomach dropped. My breathing got tight, shallow. I opened my laptop, the glow making the kitchen feel colder. I clicked through the online portal, couldn't remember half the steps Tyler had shown me, but eventually the numbers appeared. I froze. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. Hundreds gone, then thousands, months of quiet theft disguised as help. My hands shook so bad I had to rest them on the table. The dent from Tyler's old hammering caught the light. I stared at it, the memory twisting like a knife. He'd been hurting me for months, right under my nose, and worse, he thought I'd never catch it. Thought I was slipping, fading, becoming one of those old men family calls confused behind closed doors. I whispered, "How could you do this to me, boy?" But the room didn't answer. The next morning I decided to confront him. Just talk, I told myself. Just ask. But something in me knew talking wouldn't be enough. Knew this was bigger than a misunderstanding. And I was right. Because what happened when I finally confronted Tyler? That was the moment the crack turned into a rupture. A rupture from which there was no turning back. I remember the exact moment the truth stopped whispering and started screaming. It was May 2nd, 2022, one of those deceptively warm Ohio spring afternoons where the air feels gentle, but the world is about to break you open. Tyler agreed to meet me at my house after I called him that morning. He didn't ask why, didn't ask if I was okay, just said, "Yeah, sure, whatever, I'll swing by." That whatever stuck to me like mud. I spent the whole morning pacing the living room, the carpet worn thin where I'd walked the same line 100 times. The coffee pot hissed behind me, but I didn't drink any. My hands shook enough without the caffeine. When I heard his car, some beat-up Nissan he kept running on fumes, pull into the driveway, my heart thudded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. Not fear. Not anger. Something heavier, something like mourning. He came through the door without knocking again. Hoodie up, earphones dangling around his neck, thumbs flying across his phone screen. He barely looked at me. "Hey," he muttered, "I don't have a lot of time, so what's up?" I studied him for a moment, the way his jaw worked when he was annoyed, the twitch in his left eyebrow when he lied. I used to know every expression on that boy's face. Now it felt like studying a stranger. I cleared my throat. "Sit down, Tyler." He sighed like I'd asked him to carry a refrigerator up a flight of stairs. Grandpa, seriously. Sit, I repeated firmer. That did it. He flopped into the chair across from me, slouched so low he might slide off. I grabbed the stack of printed statements I'd gotten from the bank that morning. The clerk printed them for me after I told him my account looked wrong. He gave me a look I didn't like, one of those pitying looks young folks give old men, but he didn't say anything. I slid the papers across the table to Tyler. Explain these. He didn't look down at first. He just stared at me, face blank. Then he glanced at the statements and something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, not panic. Annoyance. Grandpa, are we really doing this? He said. My stomach tightened. Tell me what happened to my money. Now he picked up the papers, flipping fast through pages of withdrawals, electronic transfers, Zelle payments, ATM pulls, all with dates matching the last 7 months. His knee bounced under the table like a piston. What is this supposed to prove? He asked. That $42,800 is gone, I said, my voice cracking on the number. And you're the only one who had access. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes cold. You gave me access. No, I said firmly. I gave you help. I gave you trust. I didn't give you permission to steal my life savings. He scoffed, an ugly sound. Grandpa, you don't use that money. You live off Social Security. What do you need 40 grand for? That hit me harder than any slap could have. It wasn't just theft. It was entitlement. A belief that my life, my work, my years, my sweat belonged to him because he decided it should. I need it for my future, I said quietly. For care, for emergencies, for the things that happen when a man gets old. Tyler rolled his eyes. You're not that old. Stop acting like you're on your deathbed. My hands clenched on the table. Tyler, I want you to tell me the truth. Did you take that money? He shrugged, like I'd asked if he borrowed a screwdriver. I mean, yeah, he said finally, but not the way you're making it sound. You said I could use some, I just took what I needed. What you needed? My voice rose without my permission. Tyler, it was $42,000. He looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. You don't get it. Things are different for people my age. Rent is insane, gas is insane, student loans. You didn't finish college, I snapped. He froze, his jaw tightened, because I didn't have support. The room went dead quiet. I stared at him. I paid for your first semester. And that was nothing, he shot back. You could have helped more, you just didn't. Something inside me cracked, loudly like a bone splitting. I was still grieving your grandmother, I whispered. I was barely keeping the house together, and you think I didn't support you. He didn't answer, he didn't have to. He believed it. He actually believed it. I felt my breath getting shallow, my vision tunneled. The betrayal wasn't just in the money, it was in the way he'd rewritten the whole story of our lives to justify what he'd done. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. Tyler, I am asking you one last time. Are you telling me you stole from me? He exhaled sharply, stood up, shoved the chair back so hard it scraped the floor. You know what, if you want to call it that, fine, he said. I took it, so what? You wouldn't have used it anyway. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat a hammer blow. So what happens now? He added coldly. You gonna call the cops on your own grandson? That look real good at family dinners. The room spun slightly. I steadied myself on the table. I don't want to call the police, I said slowly. I want you to make this right, return the money. He laughed full, loud, cruel. Grandpa, the money's gone. The world stopped. What do you mean gone? Gone, he said, shrugging again. Spent bills, friends, crypto, whatever. He started toward the door. I stood up so quickly my knee gave out and I stumbled against the table. Tyler. He didn't turn around. You're throwing away your life, I said, voice breaking, and mine. He paused at the doorway, hand on the knob. For half a second he softened, just a flicker, like the boy he used to be was still in there. Then he said, without turning, you should have helped me more. And he walked out. The door closed harder than he meant to, or maybe exactly as hard as he meant to. I stood there, breath shallow, chest tight, staring at the dent he made in the table when he was 12, realizing that little hammer tap had been the first warning sign, and I'd ignored everyone since. But that moment cracked something open inside me. The betrayal wasn't a question anymore. It was a fact. And facts once seen cannot be unseen. That was the day I stopped being blind. And the day I started becoming dangerous. The days after Tyler walked out of my house felt like watching my own life collapse in slow motion. Not with explosions or sirens. No, nothing dramatic like that. It was quieter, heavier, like sand slipping through your fingers no matter how tightly you try to hold it. May in Ohio is supposed to be hopeful. Lawns turning green, windows cracked open at night, the smell of fresh rain lingering on the porch. But that May, it felt cold, empty. Every room in my house echoed like it had been cleared out, even though everything was still right where it always was. The first night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's face, bored, irritated, completely convinced he'd done nothing wrong. The money's gone. Those words kept circling my mind like vultures, and I kept asking myself the same question. How could he do it? How did I not see it? I'd wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding like I'd run a mile. I'd shuffle to the kitchen, lean on the counter and stare at the empty driveway. Used to be Tyler's car sitting out there some weekends. Used to be he'd come inside smelling like lake water or bonfire smoke, telling me stories about his friends, asking if I still had any root beer in the fridge. Now every sound outside made me flinch, like maybe he'd come back, but he never did. By the second week, something inside me had shifted into a darker mode. Not anger, not yet, just a crushing heaviness, a feeling like the world had tilted and I couldn't get my footing. One afternoon, I drove down to Columbia Federal Bank. My hands trembled the whole drive. I kept wiping my palms on my jeans, telling myself I needed answers, needed something solid to hold onto. The bank was cold inside, colder than usual, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like a nest of agitated insects. The clerk, a young woman with smooth skin and polite eyes, looked at me the way people look at old men who they're not quite sure can handle bad news. "Mr. Caldwell, it appears these transfers were done from an IP address associated with your home and mobile device." I clenched my jaw. "I don't know how to do any of that." She nodded gently, almost too gently. "Is it possible someone helped you create online access?" "Yeah," I said, "my grandson." Her eyebrows twitched, not enough to draw attention, but enough to tell me she'd seen this before, probably dozens of times. She printed more papers, page after page of withdrawals and transfers that formed a trail of Tyler's choices, a trail that led straight through my life savings. She slid them to me across the marble counter. "If you believe you've been the victim of financial exploitation," she said carefully, "we can provide you with resources. You could file a report." The words "file a report" twisted my stomach. It felt like betrayal of my own blood, felt like giving up on whatever scraps of family were left. I shook my head slowly. "Not yet." The drive home felt longer than it should have. The sky was cloudless, but everything seemed gray. I told myself I just needed time, needed to breathe, but every breath hurt. Over the next week, the loneliness turned into something sharper. Late at night, I'd sit on my back porch, wrapped in Maggie's old quilt, listening to the highway hum in the distance. I talked to her sometimes, quietly, like maybe she could hear me through the breeze rustling the maple leaves. "I failed him, Maggie, or maybe he failed all of us. I can't tell anymore." The wind didn't answer. One night around midnight, someone knocked at my door. Hard, 3 sharp raps. I flinched so violently I nearly dropped the glass of water in my hand. It was Tyler, it was Karen. She barged in, her purse swinging, her voice tight. "Dad, what is going on? Tyler's upset. He said you accused him of stealing." I stared at her for a long moment. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a rushed bun. She didn't sit, just hovered near the doorway like she didn't plan to stay long. "Karen," I said slowly, "he admitted it. He told me the money was gone." Her face twisted in frustration. "Dad, you probably misunderstood. He's under pressure. You can't just assume." "I'm not assuming," I snapped, louder than I intended. My hand trembled around the glass. "I have statements, records, he's taken it all." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad, maybe you're mixing things up." Those words sliced me open. I slammed the papers onto the table. "Read them, every line." She hesitated. She didn't want the truth. "Corinne," I said, softer, pleading almost, "I'm not losing my mind." She finally skimmed the documents, but her expression stayed guarded, conflicted. "Dad, this is messy. Maybe he thought he'd replace it. Maybe he didn't understand." I gave a bitter laugh. "He understood fine." She looked at the door. "I don't want him getting in trouble over a misunderstanding." I felt something in me break cleanly in half. "My God," I whispered, "you still think he's the victim?" She flinched. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." We stood in silence for a moment. She left without hugging me, without promising to fix anything. She just muttered, "Don't make things worse," and walked out. Her car's headlights swept across the house one last time before she turned onto the street. And just like that, I was alone. Really alone. Not the peaceful kind Maggie and I used to share. This was a hollow, echoing kind of alone. A kind that eats away at a man. Over the next several days, I barely ate. My bones felt heavier. My mind kept looping the same thought. I raised a thief. I raised a daughter who defends him. Every sound in the house felt louder. The refrigerator hum, the clock ticking, the wood creaking. I sat at the kitchen table for hours some nights, staring at stacks of papers I couldn't bring myself to organize. One night, a particularly cold one for late May, I slumped into my recliner and let myself think the one thought I'd been avoiding. Maybe I am slipping. Maybe I really am the problem. That's what financial abuse does to you. It isn't about the money, not really. It's about identity, sanity, dignity. It makes you question your own mind, your own worth. And I'll tell you the honest truth. I was close, real close to giving up, to letting the whole thing just fade into the fog of old age confusion. But then something happened, something small, almost insignificant at first, that snapped me back into myself. A knock on my door, not urgent, not loud, just a simple, polite knock. When I opened it, she stood there holding a folder and giving me the gentlest smile I'd seen in months. A nurse. A stranger. Someone who would soon become the most unlikely ally in my entire ordeal. But I'll tell you about her in the next part, because meeting her was the moment everything started to change. The woman standing on my porch that afternoon didn't look like some avenging angel or legal powerhouse. She looked normal, kind. Plain navy scrubs, hair pulled into a loose braid, a folder tucked under one arm. The kind of person you might pass in the grocery store and never think twice about. But the second she opened her mouth, something in me, something that had been curled up tight and hurting for weeks, sat up a little straighter. "Mr. Caldwell," she asked, her voice soft but steady. "I'm Nurse Rosa Delgado. I work with the Licking County Home Health Program." I blinked. Home health? I didn't call anyone. She nodded. "Your primary doctor did, Dr. Whitaker. He referred you for a wellness check after you mentioned stress during your last appointment." I hadn't even remembered telling Whitaker anything. That whole appointment in early May felt foggy now, just me sitting on a crinkling paper table while he asked the same questions he always asked. Blood pressure fine, heart okay, knees shot to hell. And then he'd asked, "Everything all right at home?" And I'd hesitated a moment too long. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. Something about her presence filled the room, quiet, neat, gentle. She set her folder on the kitchen table and gave me a look that wasn't pitying, wasn't patronizing, just human. "I understand you've been under some emotional strain recently," she said. I let out a bitter breath. That's one way to put it. She didn't push, didn't pry, just said, "Sometimes talking helps. Sometimes people need resources, and sometimes people need someone who actually listens." That last part hit harder than I expected. I sank into my chair, the one with the dented table in front of it, and rubbed my temples. "Do you have anyone you can trust right now?" she asked. The answer came out before I could filter it. No. She nodded like she'd heard the same answer 100 times. Then I'll start by being someone neutral. May I ask what happened? I didn't tell her everything at once. Not the whole 42,000, not the bank statements, not the confrontation that had left me shaking for days. Just small pieces, fragmented sentences. My grandson took money, a lot of it. My daughter doesn't believe me. Rosa didn't flinch, didn't look shocked or confused or skeptical. That steadiness alone felt like a lifeline. Financial exploitation of older adults is more common than you think, she said quietly. I see it every month, sometimes every week. I swallowed hard. You're saying I'm not losing my mind. She leaned forward. I'm saying you're not alone and you're not crazy. For the first time in weeks, my lungs expanded fully, like I could take a deep breath without it hurting. She flipped open her folder. You have rights, Mr. Caldwell, and options. If someone took advantage of you, there are legal avenues and investigators who specialize in elder fraud. The word investigators made something inside me jolt awake. I don't want to ruin his life, I whispered. I understand, she said, but he's already disrupting yours. We talked for nearly an hour. She took notes, asked careful questions, guided me through things I didn't even realize I needed to say. There was no judgment in her eyes, only concern. Genuine, patient concern. And something else too, resolve. When she closed her folder, she said, I think you should speak with someone at Adult Protective Services. They deal with these situations all the time. I must have made a face because she added, they're not the bad guys. They don't come in swinging. They start by listening and documenting. If there's evidence, they'll help you take next steps. I hesitated. Would they talk to Tyler? Only if you want them to, and only after they gather details. My fingers tapped the table, right over the dent Tyler made at 12. That stupid dent had never felt heavier. Rosa watched me carefully. Can I make a suggestion? I nodded. Don't decide anything today, but let me leave you with some information. And if you want, I can schedule an APS intake interview for you. No commitment, just a conversation. I exhaled, long shaky. All right, I said, a conversation. She smiled, warm but with something firm beneath it. Strength. Good, I'll set it up. As she gathered her things, I asked, why do you care so much? You don't even know me. She paused at the door. My father, she said softly, was taken advantage of when he was older, and nobody listened. I promised myself I'd never let that happen on my watch again. Our eyes met. Something in mine must have shown the weight I'd been carrying, because she gave my shoulder a gentle pat before stepping onto the porch. I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Caldwell. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the papers spread across it. The bank statements, the warning letters, the scribbled notes. For weeks they'd felt like heavy chains tethering me to guilt and confusion. But now they looked different. They looked like evidence. That night, for the first time in a month, I slept. Not well, not fully, but enough that the nightmares didn't claw at me quite so hard. The next afternoon, Rosa returned with a name. His name is Investigator Daniel Hensley, she said. APS, 20 years experience, straight shooter. He'll meet you here tomorrow morning. My stomach tightened. What will he do? She gave me a steady look. He'll listen, and he'll help you start putting the pieces together. For the first time since this nightmare began, hope didn't feel like a lie. I wasn't strong enough to fight this alone. But now I wasn't alone. And with every piece of evidence I gathered, every form, every date, every transfer, something inside me sharpened. This wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about justice. And soon enough, Tyler was going to feel the ground shift beneath his feet. I didn't sleep much the night before Investigator Daniel Hensley came over. Not because I was scared of him. No, I was scared of what he might confirm. Scared that everything I suspected would finally harden into fact, something I couldn't wish away or soften with excuses. When the morning came, May 18, 2022, it was already humid. The kind of sticky Ohio morning where your shirt clings to your back even before breakfast. I brewed a pot of coffee, but my stomach was too tight to drink more than a sip. I kept wiping my palms on my jeans, pacing, sitting, standing, pacing again. At exactly 9:03 a.m. his car pulled up. A county-issued tan sedan. Out stepped a man in his late 40s, stocky, with a trimmed beard and eyes that scanned my property like he was measuring it for a crime scene. Not suspicious, just experienced. He wore khakis, a button-up shirt, and a badge clipped to his belt. He knocked firm, controlled. "Mr. Caldwell." "That's me." He extended his hand. "I'm Daniel Hensley. Your nurse, Ms. Delgado, told me a bit about your situation." Rosa stood just behind him, giving me a nod. "She'd come early to make sure you feel supported," she'd said. "Truth is, I don't think she trusted that the county would take me seriously without a witness, and I respected the hell out of her for that." We sat at the kitchen table, the three of us. Daniel pulled out a small notebook and a pen, but he didn't open it right away. Instead, he looked directly at me. "Mr. Caldwell, I need you to tell me, in your own words, what you think has been happening." My mouth went dry, but I started, slowly. I told him about the missing money, the online banking Tyler set up, the withdrawals I never approved, the confrontation, the way Karen dismissed me like I was misremembering my own life. "I know I'm old," I said, voice cracking, "but I'm not confused. I know what he did." Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't rush. He wrote a few notes, glanced at the papers I'd spread across the table. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, voice firm but gentle, "everything you've described is textbook financial exploitation." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. Rosa touched my arm. "You're doing the right thing." Daniel continued, "I see this all the time. A family member gains access, starts with small transfers, then bigger ones, often justified as help. Sometimes the victim is pressured. Sometimes the victim is dismissed by other relatives. You're not alone in this." I swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" "Well," he said, pulling out a form, "first we start an official APS report. That gives us the legal right to investigate, gather documents, interview parties. If the evidence supports it, this can escalate to the sheriff or county prosecutor. Depends on what we find." The word prosecutor made my chest tighten, not out of fear, out of something like relief mixed with shock. Everything had felt so uncertain for weeks. Hearing the possibility of accountability made me feel more grounded than I had since March. Daniel looked at me carefully. "But Mr. Caldwell, before we go further, I need to ask you something important." My breath caught. "Ask." "Are you prepared for what might happen if we pursue this, including the possibility of criminal charges against your grandson?" I stared down at the table. The dent Tyler made when he was 12 seemed to stare back at me, accusing and innocent all at once. Rosa spoke softly. "Whatever choice you make, we'll support you." I lifted my eyes. "He took $42,800 from me. He lied to my face. He left me with $17. He didn't even apologize." Daniel nodded slowly. "So you want to move forward?" I closed my eyes and whispered, "Yes." He clicked his pen. "Good, let's get started." For the next 2 hours we worked through paperwork, signatures, dates, statements. Rosa helped me organize everything. My hands shook too much to staple anything straight. Then Daniel said something that made a cold, electric shiver crawl up my spine. "Mr. Caldwell, we're going to need recorded evidence." I blinked. Recorded. Conversations, admissions, anything that proves intent. Without that, Tyler could claim confusion, misunderstanding, or that you gave him permission. We need him on record. "How am I supposed to get that?" I asked, my voice wobbling slightly. Daniel opened his briefcase and produced a small device, no bigger than a pack of gum, sleek, black, unmarked. "This records audio with high clarity," he said. "Turn it on, put it in your pocket, talk to him. Don't mention money right away. Let him talk. Let him ramble. If he admits anything, even vaguely, that's evidence." I stared at the device like it was a rattlesnake. "He won't come here. He's been avoiding me." Daniel shrugged. Call him, pretend you're letting things go, pretend you want to talk, guilt, nostalgia, anything that gets him in the room. Rosa added, you were his grandfather long before you were his victim. That bond might still get him to show up. My stomach churned, and if he does? Daniel's voice hardened, then we subpoena him. It was the first time I'd heard real steel from him. As he packed up, Daniel said something that stuck with me. Mr. Caldwell, you're not powerless. People think older adults are easy targets because they won't fight back, but you're fighting back, and that matters. After he left, Rosa stayed a while longer. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat across from me. You did well, she said. I feel sick, I replied. That's normal. She watched me for a moment, then said, can I ask you something personal? Sure. When you confront him, what do you want to hear? I looked out the window at the empty driveway. I want to hear the truth, I said. For once in his life, I want him to tell me the truth. She nodded, touched my hand gently, and left. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the recorder sitting in front of me like a loaded gun. I dialed Tyler's number. It rang 4 times. Then he picked up. Grandpa, he said, sounding surprised. Everything okay? I forced my voice to stay steady. Tyler, I think we should talk. A pause, a long one. Then, yeah, okay, I can come by tomorrow. My hand shook when I hung up. Because tomorrow, for the first time since this nightmare began, I'd have a weapon in my pocket. And the truth was about to come out, whether Tyler wanted it to or not. Tyler showed up the next afternoon wearing the same faded hoodie he always wore, the one with the frayed cuffs and a stain on the left sleeve he'd never bothered to scrub out. His hair was uncombed and he looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight. But not guilty. Never guilty. That would have required a conscience. I heard his car rumble into the driveway at exactly 2:14 p.m. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table for nearly an hour before that, palms damp, heart beating hard enough I could feel it in the back of my throat. The recorder was in my shirt pocket, switched on, warm against my chest like it had a pulse of its own. When Tyler walked through the door, again without knocking, I forced myself to smile. A small one, weak, but warm enough to seem real. Hey, Grandpa, he said, tossing his keys onto the counter like he lived here. You sounded weird on the phone. Everything all right? Yeah, I said, keeping my voice soft. Just wanted to talk, sit down. He pulled out a chair and dropped into it, slouching like a bored student. His eyes darted around the kitchen, lingering on the stack of papers I had purposely not placed on the table. I didn't want to spook him. I needed him relaxed, talking. I took a seat across from him and folded my hands. I've been thinking a lot, I began, about the money and about how things got out of hand. He tensed, just barely. His knee twitched under the table. I continued, I don't want us to fight anymore. He exhaled, relieved. Good, because honestly, Grandpa, this whole thing has been blown way out of proportion. There it was, that careless arrogance, and the recorder caught every word. I know, I said, nodding. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I misunderstood. I'm getting older. My memory isn't perfect. He leaned back, smirking slightly. Yeah, exactly. And I told Mom that. I said you probably mix things up. A chill crawled down my spine. You're probably right, I said, voice steady but jaw clenched. But I do want to understand Tyler for my own sake, for clarity. He shrugged. Okay, what do you want to know? I took a slow breath. I just want to hear it from you. What happened with the money? He rolled his eyes as if this were a tedious conversation he'd had a dozen times. Grandpa, it wasn't some big scheme. You said I could use it. I told you I needed help with rent, with bills, with $42,000, I asked, keeping my tone light, almost curious. He shifted in his seat. Well, it added up. And the transfers, I pressed, the withdrawals, all those payments. He ran a hand through his hair. I mean, yeah, some of it went to other stuff, but it wasn't stealing. I didn't steal from you. My pulse hammered. So you're saying you took the money, but you don't call it stealing? He shrugged again. It wasn't stealing if you said I could use it. You said that. You told me to handle your online banking. You trusted me with it. How is that stealing?" His voice had that tone again, accusatory, defensive, dripping with entitlement. And the recorder was soaking up every word like a sponge. "I see," I said. "So you took the money because I trusted you with it." "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "Finally, you're understanding. And you knew I didn't approve each transfer." He hesitated, just a flicker, then, "You didn't have to. You told me to handle things." I swallowed. "And the $1,200 in March." "Oh my God," he groaned, rubbing his face. "You're still on about that." "Yes, Grandpa, I used it. Okay, I used it for something important." "And the 4,000 in April." He waved a dismissive hand. "Yeah, that too." "And the 2,000 the week before that." His jaw ticked, but he nodded. "Yes." "And you knew it wasn't yours." That made him bristle. "Don't twist things. I thought of it as borrowing, like long-term borrowing." "Borrowing," I repeated. "Yeah," he said. "I was gonna pay it back someday." "Someday," I said quietly. He didn't catch the shift in my tone. He was too focused on defending himself. I leaned back, breathing slowly. "And you didn't think that taking all of it, every dollar, would hurt me?" He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Grandpa, you barely use that money. You sit in this house all day. What are you saving it for? You're not going on cruises or buying new cars. You're old." The words hit me like a punch to the chest, but I didn't flinch. Couldn't, not now. And he added, "It's not like you were gonna notice." There it was. "It's not like you were gonna notice." The sentence that sealed everything. My throat tightened, but not with grief, not with loss. With purpose. I let a long silence hang between us. Tyler looked at me, confused by the way I was studying him, calm, focused, unwavering. "Grandpa," he asked, "why are you staring at me like that?" "Because," I said slowly, "for the first time in a long time, I see things clearly." His eyebrows pulled together. "What does that mean?" I reached into my pocket. His eyes followed the motion. He didn't see the recorder, not yet. Not until it was already on the table, blinking its tiny red light. His face drained of color. What is that?" he stammered. "It's the truth," I said. He shot up from his chair. "Are you serious? You recorded me. That's illegal." "No," I said calmly. "Not in Ohio. One-party consent means I'm allowed to record any conversation I'm part of." He froze, staring at me, rage and fear and disbelief swirling across his face. "How could you do this to me?" he whispered. "You did this to yourself." He lunged for the recorder, but I closed my hand over it before he could reach it. In that moment, seeing the panic in his eyes, the realization that he'd finally cornered himself, I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Something colder. Something necessary. "Tyler," I said, voice low and steady, "you took $42,000 from me. All I took from you was your excuse." He stared at me, breathing heavy, trapped between anger and terror. "We're done," I said quietly. "And tomorrow morning APS won't just have paperwork, they'll have your confession." This wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. This was only the beginning. Tyler left my house like a man fleeing a fire, fast, frantic, nearly tripping over the welcome mat Maggie bought 20 years ago. His car tires screeched as he peeled out of the driveway, gravel spitting behind him. I stood at the window, the recorder still warm in my hand, watching the dust settle long after he disappeared. The house felt different then. Not lighter, not heavier either, just real, solid, like the truth had finally taken up all the space Tyler's lies once filled. I sat down at the kitchen table, my old battlefield, and played the recording back. Hearing his voice through that tiny speaker made my stomach twist. "You barely use that money. You're old. It's not like you were gonna notice." I closed my eyes and breathed slowly, letting each word settle like stones in a riverbed. Not to drown me, but to weigh down the truth so it couldn't move anymore. The next morning, Rosa arrived first. She didn't knock, she peeked through the screen door and called softly, "Mr. Caldwell, you ready?" I was not really, but I nodded anyway. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You did the hardest part already, she said. Today is just follow-through. At 9:11 a.m., Daniel Hensley pulled into the driveway. He walked in with a calm confidence that made me feel steadier just being in the same room as him. He sat at the table, took a sip of the coffee I offered, then said, "All right, let's hear it." I set the recorder on the table, pressed play. For the next 10 minutes, none of us spoke. Tyler's voice, arrogant, dismissive, self-assured, filled the kitchen. Every admission, every justification, every insult. Rosa's jaw tightened. Daniel's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. When it ended, the room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Daniel leaned forward. "Mr. Caldwell, this is incredibly strong evidence. He admits to the transfers. He admits he knew the money wasn't his. He acknowledges the amounts. This is a confession." I swallowed. "So what now?" He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "I'm filing the APS report today, with this recording attached. Then I'll coordinate with the county sheriff's office. This is likely to move quickly." My stomach fluttered. "Quickly? How quickly?" He looked at me steadily. "Days, maybe a week." I felt the room tilt slightly. Rosa stepped closer, steadying me with a hand on my shoulder. Daniel continued, "Mr. Caldwell, given the amount, over $40,000, and the repeated withdrawals, this isn't petty theft. This is felony-level exploitation. The prosecutor will almost certainly pursue charges." The word felony echoed in my head. "He's my grandson," I whispered. Daniel nodded gently, "and he committed a crime." Rosa added softly, "You're not punishing him, you're protecting yourself." But it didn't feel like protection. Not fully. It felt like burying a family line with my own hands. Daniel packed up the recorder. "I'll be in touch soon. Keep your phone on. And if Tyler tries to contact you, call me immediately." After he left, Rosa stayed. She made tea, mint tea from a pouch she carried in her purse, and sat with me at the table. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes justice feels like grief, doesn't mean it's wrong. For 3 days, nothing happened. No calls, no texts, no knocks. Corinne didn't come by. Tyler didn't show his face. The quiet pressed in like humidity before a storm. Then on the 4th day, May 23rd, 4:46 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Deputy Clark with the Licking County Sheriff's Office. Is this Mr. Caldwell?" My throat tightened. "Yes. We've reviewed the APS report and accompanying evidence. A warrant has been issued for Tyler Jennings." My heart dropped into my stomach. "A warrant?" I repeated. "Yes, sir, for felony theft from a protected adult. We'll be taking him into custody either tonight or tomorrow morning." I didn't speak, didn't breathe. "Mr. Caldwell," the deputy said gently, "I'm sorry you're going through this, but you did the right thing." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that grows roots. I stared at the family pictures on the wall, Tyler at 3 years old on my shoulders, Tyler at 10 holding a fishing pole, Tyler at 16 standing awkwardly in a suit for his school dance. I stared until my vision blurred. At 7:12 p.m. that same night, Corinne arrived unannounced. She stormed into the house, face flushed, eyes wild. "Dad," she cried, "what did you do?" I stood slowly. "Corinne." She slammed a paper onto the table, a copy of the warrant. "They're arresting my son, my son. Do you understand what that means?" I swallowed hard. "He stole from me $42,000. She shook her head violently. "He told me you recorded him like some kind of trap." "He confessed," I said. "Not because I forced him, because he believed it was justified." "You're destroying his future," she screamed. I steadied myself against the table. My knees were shaking too hard to hide it. "No," I said quietly. "He destroyed it the moment he stole from me." She stared at me, trembling. "I can't believe you do this to family." Something in me snapped. "I begged you to listen," I shouted, louder than I'd yelled in years. My voice cracked raw. You chose not to. You sided with him. You let him treat me like a senile old man. You enabled every lie he told." She flinched as if struck. We stood in thick silence. Then she whispered, "I hope the court has mercy on him, because clearly you don't." Then she walked out. That night I barely slept. I sat on the porch with the mint tea Rosa had left behind, staring at the moonlit yard, listening to the distant sirens of Newark drifting through the humid air. At 10:37 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "He's in custody. We'll update you tomorrow." No details, no ceremony. Just a fact. Tyler had been arrested. My grandson. My blood. And as I sat there, the night warm and still around me, I didn't feel triumph. I felt grief, deep old grief, grief mixed with something heavier, something like resolve shaped by betrayal and necessity. Justice always takes something from you, always. But it also gives something back. And the next day, at Tyler's arraignment, I would find out exactly what. The morning of Tyler's arraignment, the air felt strangely still, one of those Ohio mornings where the sky hangs low and colorless, like the world's holding its breath. I was up before dawn, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I barely touched. My hands weren't shaking as badly as they had been in May, but there was still a tremor in them, a nervous rhythm I couldn't quite steady. Rosa insisted on taking me to the courthouse. "You shouldn't go alone," she'd said over the phone. "I'm fine," I told her. But she came anyway. We drove in silence most of the way. Newark streets were half empty, early commuters slipping through intersections, the courthouse ahead rising like an old stone reminder that choices always come with consequences. Inside, the place smelled like paper, old carpet, and something faintly metallic, like cold air from a vent that hadn't been cleaned in months. We took seats near the back, the hard wooden benches unforgiving on my lower spine. Rosa sat beside me, hands folded neatly in her lap. Tyler was brought in wearing a county-issued jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front. His hair was disheveled, eyes dull, shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't even look angry. He looked small. And that hurt more than I was ready for. Karen was already there, sitting in the front row, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She didn't look back at me, didn't acknowledge Rosa, didn't wipe her tears even when one slid down her cheek. She just stared forward, rigid as a fence post. When Tyler finally lifted his eyes and saw me, his expression shifted, confusion, then shock, then something like betrayal. As if I had done this to him. As if he hadn't laid the foundation himself. His attorney, public defender by the look of him, whispered in his ear. Tyler nodded slowly. The judge called the case. State of Ohio versus Tyler Jennings. The charges were listed out. Theft from a protected adult. Unauthorized use of a financial device. Financial exploitation of an elderly person. Hearing those words spoken out loud in a courtroom was like feeling the weight of everything all over again. But this time, the weight wasn't on my shoulders alone. It was shared by the system that had finally stepped in. "Does the defendant have anything to say regarding the charges?" the judge asked. Tyler glanced back at me once more, his eyes desperate, confused, and still so young. He looked like a scared child, but then he looked away, jaw tightening. "Not guilty, Your Honor." I felt my chest tighten. Not with anger. With sadness. The judge set bail, far higher than Karen could afford, and scheduled a preliminary hearing. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Jennings, these are serious charges. The state has provided substantial evidence, including a recorded admission. I advise you to work closely with your counsel." Tyler swallowed hard, eyes darting around the room. For a moment he looked like he might turn toward me, say something, ask something. But he didn't. They led him out the side door. He didn't look back. Karen stood slowly after the hearing. Rosa stayed seated beside me. I didn't know if that made Karen angrier or just sadder. She approached us, voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, why couldn't you just talk to me?" "I tried," I said softly. "You didn't want to believe me." She closed her eyes. He's my son. And I'm your father. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know how to choose between you. You don't have to choose, I said, but you also don't get to ignore what he did. Her voice cracked. Do you want him to go to prison? I took a long breath. My chest felt tight, heavy. I want him to face what he did. I want him to learn. I want him to grow. I want him to become the man he was supposed to be. And if prison is part of that, she whispered. I stared at the scuffed floor. Then that's between him and the law, not me. She nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheek. I need time. I know, I said. Take all you need. She walked away without hugging me. The distance between us felt wide but not hopeless, not like before. Rosa placed a hand on my arm. You did what you had to. Maybe, I said, but it doesn't feel like victory. It's not supposed to, she replied. Justice isn't about feeling good. It's about setting things right. We stepped outside into the morning air. It smelled like cut grass and faint exhaust fumes, ordinary smells, grounding smells. The courthouse behind us hummed with life, people coming and going, their own tragedies and triumphs unfolding in those stone walls. As we reached the parking lot, Rosa paused. What will you do now? I took a moment before answering. I'll live, I said, not just exist, live. Maggie would have wanted that. Rosa smiled softly. And if you ever need anything at all, you call me. I will, I said. She dropped me off at home. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in the hollow way it had felt after Tyler first betrayed me. This quiet had shape to it, purpose. I walked to the kitchen table, touched the dent from Tyler's childhood one more time, and then, finally, put a small cloth over it. Not to forget it, but to stop letting it define the whole surface. Over the weeks that followed, the legal process moved on without me needing to push. APS handled everything. The prosecutor reviewed the evidence. Tyler eventually took a plea deal, reduced charges, restitution agreement, probation, mandatory financial counseling, and a criminal record that would follow him into adulthood. Not prison, but accountability. Karen and we talk now, slowly, carefully. Healing is slow work. And me. I keep going. I go to the VFW on Thursdays. I take walks in the evenings. I even started attending the senior center Rosa recommended, mostly for the coffee, but maybe also for the company. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the porch with my hands around a warm mug and think about everything that happened. $42,800. The price of betrayal. The cost of survival. The weight of justice. I didn't get the money back, but I got myself back. And at my age, that's worth more than all the savings in the world.